we're not talking about next year, but in a decade or so, there isn't going to be much operational HR to do that isn't mostly automated. It's going to be that the HR person's job is going to become strategic, whether the HR person really embraces it or not. And if you have a good people analytics tool at your disposal and you understand the value of that data, then you're more than halfway to actually making good on that strategic promise.
Yeah, and what you're able to do is not necessarily throw out the investment in various technologies, but optimize them. So you're a friend of the CFO too.
Exactly. And who doesn't want to be that? Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Small Talk Window. We have a small window of time to dispense with the small talk as quickly as possible and settle into a meaningful conversation around the world of work. My guest today is John Federman, who is CEO of HireRoad. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for joining us for the podcast today. Can you share with our audience just a little bit about who you are, what brought you to HireRoad? I've heard some great things. Take it away.
Always happy to talk about myself. Listen, HireRoad is a company that offers a series of platforms and tools for HR professionals, from ATS to Learn to Onboard. But I would say that the shining star of the portfolio, if you will, is our people analytics platform called People Insight. And I was intrigued by the company. I was intrigued by the offering. I've been a CEO of SaaS-based organizations for the past 25 years. And this company had all the ingredients that I look for. A really strong product portfolio, customers that are huge advocates and in fact, zealots of the category of people analytics.
Zealots.
And a team that was really just ready to take the market on. So I was excited when I heard about the opportunity and jumped in with both feet.
I love to hear about zealots in HCM. That's what I like to hear.
Right.
I'm glad you brought up people analytics because that's what we want to talk about today, specifically around, who have we sort of seen what people analytics are for versus who they can be for, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we could start off with this. People analytics aren't just for large enterprises anymore. And can you maybe explain why?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that we have a great respect for the way the category grew up. And I think the category grew up at the largest of enterprises. And there were evangelists who, rightly so, believed that HR and the practice was probably the last bastion, the last category or department that was not data-driven in an organization. Whether it's your product team, your sales team, your marketing team, all are really data-driven. And more often than not, what we found is that HR practitioners were still going by gut instinct. And the largest enterprises said enough. And there were some early evangelists, both in terms of the users and in terms of the vendors, who responded to that requirement and created really big, heavy, complex platforms that delivered the kind of analytics and insights that are absolutely essential to make a business and its team and its asset of people the most productive it could be. And so I think that rightly so, large enterprises became the biggest advocates and the earliest. But as you sort of prefaced in your question, we're at a point of transition when, and I wouldn't say small business, because I still don't think people analytics really are going to work, if you have 100 employees kind of thing. It'll take a lot of effort to make it get you the kind of ROI that you want. But just above that, a couple hundred employees to several thousand, And I sort of look at big enterprise as that demarcation of 10,000 or greater employees. But there's a whole world of organizations, the lion's share of organizations, that aren't that 10,000 plus. And what we're finding, and certainly in our customer base and our prospect base, and in the stories of success that they're sharing with us, that there's a great amount of benefit to those organizations that I would really define as sort of mid-enterprise, not large enterprise.
It really is the vast majority of the market by far, and it's so invigorating to hear that people analytics really are accessible to them. There's a couple things that you brought up, and this is a small talk window, so we have a shortish window of time, so I'm going to try to be as efficient as possible with these ideas, but they're really interesting to me. One is, this has been bandied about in the past. It happened. HCM HR is kind of following in marketing footsteps from a few years ago. You would say marketing might have been the penultimate department to sort of give up its gut instincts and just run on that solely and to kind of become data driven, which has been great for marketing. So that's one thing. Another thing that you mentioned is, yes, this isn't necessarily for small businesses because you haven't quite got to that point yet. But there's a point in every small organization's growth where it's no longer a small organization, it's becoming definable as a medium-sized organization. That's typically right ahead of that, right in that general vicinity. They're sort of figuring out, okay, we have to do something real here for HR. We can't be using all these sort of just ad hoc solutions and these accidental HR people. We need to sort of form an HR department and maybe get a technology stack put together here. And so it's very interesting that, they're so focused on their operational HR, which is, it's understandable. They're laser focused on that. But at the same time, it's a great opportunity for them to start thinking strategically about HCM at the same time.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Tonight on NBC, Jimmy Fallon and Bozoma St. John host the highly anticipated new competition show.
I hired 10 creatives from all walks of life. They will be battling it out to see who can impress the world's biggest brands.
This is a huge opportunity.
This is the battle for the next big idea.
This is not play.
We're spending millions of dollars.
I'm so excited to embark on this adventure with all of you.
May the best idea win!
On Brand with Jimmy Fallon, series premiere tonight on NBC.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting to know what your tenure is on average. It's more interesting when you can combine that with what was my source relative to recruiting for that employee? What was their satisfaction relative to customer employee satisfaction surveys? What department were they in, and what manager guided them? And what you tend to find is that in the kind of organizations we're describing, there is likely not a data scientist full-time living within that HR team. And trying to get that access to that kind of professional is really difficult. And so the question becomes, how can you take a disparate HR tech stack, which is the definition of most of these mid-size enterprises? How do you normalize the terminology, the nomenclature? How do you find a way to create a single source of truth that every C-level is asking for right now, at the board level and at the C-level? It's simply not gee, it would be great if we had it. It's, this is what I'm requiring for my board meeting. And the question becomes, how do you do it? Well, you can go at it with a bunch of spreadsheets and probably come up with a different answer every time. You can go out and hire a data scientist, which is largely cost prohibitive, and then you need to buy a people analytics platform. Or you find a partner, perhaps, like what we've done with People Insight by HireRoad, which is to understand that we're dealing with practitioners, not data scientists. And how do we make this easy? How do we drive results that are scalable and repeatable? And how do we deliver the asset from the human resources team that becomes another data-driven component, another lever for the C-level to rely upon? That's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, and this reminds me of something we were talking about in a previous conversation in the green room, if you will. The Small Talk Window also has a green room, just like the late shows on TV. But in any event, talking about that sort of that post-transactional data that's sort of maybe sort of one-dimensional versus that richer data, and also being able to empower your executives with that information that you have at your disposal now with more modern people analytics. We talked about multiple sources of truth versus a single source of truth, which I thought was really illuminating when we were talking about that. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about those data points, the post-transactional versus better, richer data that helps better inform executives, because we're talking about stuff that's not nice to have anymore, but must have.
Yeah, I mean, look, if an organization is really thinking about it, and they think about the opportunity lost and the revenue loss of having an open position, they think about what it takes to make their team work in the best way it can. These aren't afterthoughts. They're not, oh, I should have. And no longer will those who are HR professionals have the opportunity to say, I wish I'd seen that. Instead, what they want is a seat at the table. They want to be able to drive what is the efficacy of our operation. And at the heart of every operation are its people. And so we don't look at the data and the data that's driven out of the platform People Insight as an afterthought. We look at it as a preemptive. We look at it as a proactive. And we think about those that become the best practitioners as, one of the things we heard from one of our clients is he said, you know what, I look at this as my way to get promoted. I look at this as my way to have a voice in the organization that isn't a service organization, but is a strategic organization. And that's a fundamental shift.
It is a fundamental shift, and we are running up on the end of the podcast, but I just want to put a fine point on what you're saying, because this really is the ticket for HR. Because, as the years wear on, we're not talking about next year, but, in a decade or so, there isn't going to be much operational HR to do that isn't mostly automated. It's going to be that the HR person's job is going to become strategic, whether the HR person really embraces it or not. So that's an opportunity to sort of embrace that future, and if you have a good people analytics tool at your disposal and you understand the value of that data, then you're more than halfway to actually making good on that strategic promise.
Yeah, and what you're able to do is not necessarily throw out the investment in various technologies, but optimize them. So you're a friend of the CFO too.
Exactly. And who doesn't want to be that? Thank you so much, John, for joining us today. It's been a fascinating conversation. I'm glad that people analytics are becoming democratized.
Terrific. Thank you for the time.